Basil.
My name is Irene Lowry.
Jennifer Hammond.
But I'm Dolly Pardon Me in roller derby life and on the track.
My roller derby name is Anya Knees.
My derby name, well, my full derby name is Cyrene Fairyboard version 2.2 from the realm of fairies of the tribe of Hodeg Riders, but it doesn't fit on my jersey, so they call me Cyborg. I currently play for Quad Squad.
My team is the Reservoir Dolls, and
right now I play for the Vaudeville Vixens.
I first learned about roller derby from my friend Anya Knees, and she and I have a history back way before roller derby. She was actually friends with my husband before I even knew him, and we got to know each other and got along really, really well and had a good time. And she started telling me about this thing she was doing called roller derby, and then she told me it involved roller skating, and then I was like, what's roller derby? And so
there were flyers to try out something, so I was taking a belly dancing class at Union South. And one of the girls said, do you want to try something that's starting out? Sure.
Well, my boyfriend's friend was playing in the exhibition bout, so we were going to see her play. And when we watched her play, then they had something in the program that said come to tryouts on Wednesday, so I came to those next tryouts, or actually it was an open skate at that time. So that's how I learned about it. I think that the perceptions are changing a little bit, but it's still a perception of like a kitschy sport where everybody's dressed up, you know, in their fishnets and skimpy skirts, and they're just going to hit somebody, you know.
You know, it's a performance as well. I mean, a lot of us get into the more creative aspect of it, and sometimes that's the only part that they see. Sometimes the only part that they notice is the short skirts.
And I think that's changing a little bit, or skaters are trying to get that to change a little bit, but the public's perception is still of kind of like, oh, well, that's something fun to do every once in a while, go see roller derby. Unless you're involved with people that are in the league.
Or they make assumptions like you're just in general, like you're not very smart, or you don't have like a life outside of derby, you know.
And it involves an extremely interesting and diverse group of women, all walks of life. You have your doctors, your nurses, you've got your entrepreneurs, you got your creative folks, you got your kids going to your women going to school, and then you have your kind of floaters, and I mean just everybody's in there, and it's such a neat and vibrant environment to be a part of.
So I think people just have the perception because of their past experience and not really knowing what it is roller derby is today, not having seen a bout in a long time, or if ever.
So I think they perceive that we're like female wrestler type people instead of real people.
I think just based on their past, or some of the movies that people have seen in the past, or if they grew up and they remember their grandpa or their dad watching roller derby on TV, that's what they saw. So maybe they haven't seen it yet, or maybe they saw us when we first started up, and we had people dressed up in costumes that, you know, gave us penalty showdown games, or, you know, we all went through Spank Alley or had to go, you know, and it was a lot more kitschy and fun, but it's also much more of a sport than people realize it until they see it. And I think they just have that previous perception of past roller derby. And I remember when I was captain, it was back when the rules were such that there was still fighting allowed as long as you okayed it with the refs. Well, one of my teammates didn't okay or fight with the refs, and you could tell that it wasn't a fight that was okayed with one of the other girls. But the crowd loved it, and that's why we had the rules the way they were back then. Now we're trying to develop more as a sport and be looked at, you know, as an athletic, credible, competitive sport, which it really is. So the fighting and all that stuff is now gone from the rules, but remembering those days.
I think that the perception of the reality of roller derby has been improving over the last few years. Once upon a time, the perception was that it was like this white trash sport, and it wasn't really a sport, and it was all staged. Well, actually, I think when roller derby started, a lot of it was staged. It was kind of like WWF. But over the years, it has evolved into a highly challenging, very legitimate sport. I mean, we've got...
I don't think people realize that we don't just do this, you know, to make money doing this. We do it as like a recreational sport outside of what we have to do to make money. But it's really highly athletic as well.
You get, oh my god, that's so cool! And then you get roller derby. What's roller derby? And so then you get an opportunity to explain it. And then sometimes the people who didn't know what roller derby was, they're like, oh my gosh, when is your next bout? And then other people are like, okay.
Usually there's a lot of surprise, like, oh really, you play roller derby? I wouldn't expect that. Or, oh, you're one of those roller derby girls. I won't mess with you. Kind of shock, and they think that I'm a tough girl. I'm like, okay.
I really appreciate the dynamic and the interesting nuances associated with each team. I mean, each team kind of has its own team personality, in my opinion. And like, you look at the Res Dolls, and their team personality, at least from my perspective, kind of goes with the persona, you know, with the ties and stuff. They tend to be, I feel, more serious and maybe kind of intense in a serious kind of way than in the other teams. You got your Vixens, they're full of flair and flamboyancy, and you've even got folks coming out with feathers sometimes, and it's you know, they really get into that aspect of it. Plus they have a lot of people on their team who are incredibly creative, and so you find a lot more detail with regard to their uniforms. You know, Quad Squad, we're the superheroes, and we really get into being superheroes. Even, and as our team culture, we really try to keep play really classy and positive, and we have a kill 'em with kindness kind of attitude. And then we've got our vampire team, and you know, they actually do like dark secretive things all by themselves, and we don't really know a lot about that, but it's definitely there.
And then we have our two travel teams, which are the Dairyland Dolls, which is to represent Wisconsin. And then we also have our team Unicorn, which is another travel team, and that's about being, like, we say bringing the sparkle and glitter to Derby. So it's like, we like to bring hard hits, hard play.
The rules of roller derby are that you have 5 skaters from each team on the track at once. Out of those 5 skaters, there are 4 blockers and 1 jammer. So 2 jammers face off. The first whistle blows, and the blockers try to get their jammer through to get a lead jammer. Then whoever is lead jammer, basically the first person to get through legally in bounds and pass everyone, they have the ability to then call off the jam. Meanwhile, the other jammer's trying to get out of the pack, and you then score points for every blocker on the opposing team that you pass legally and in bounds as you go through the pack. So you want to maximize those points scored. The blockers have to fall within the rules of engagement, in that you can only hit people in certain positions or in certain parts of the body. So the blockers will then try to knock down the opposing blockers that are in their jammer's way, or to knock down the opposing jammer to keep her from getting any points. I think your personality, you've got to take into account things you like, as well as the person that you'd kind of like want to show as your derby self. Because this is your counterpart. My derby name came about actually based on one of the first practices where we were doing a weaving drill, and I was kind of bumping into everybody because I wasn't really that good on my skates initially, and saying, sorry, excuse me, and they're like, there's no excuse me in roller derby. And I was telling my boyfriend about this after I had gotten home from practice that night. And he said, "You should be Dolly Parton me," because I love Dolly Parton. And after hearing that story, I think it just kind of hit him. I'm like, yeah, I should be. And I came back to practice the next day, and one of the girls, there was Hacksaw. Jewels of Denial said it to me, but we had a lot of different girls who had like hardcore names. And she's like, "That's not tough enough. Dolly Parton me, that's not tough enough." So really what was in a name for me, though, wasn't being tough. It was just playing off of a part of myself that I love, you know, always wanted to be able to sing like Dolly Parton. And she was one of my favorite singers because my parents would always listen to country music too. So I brought that part into my derby persona, and now everybody knows me as Dolly, and they don't oftentimes know what my real name is anymore. But I think that's why it has to be more personal, because you're the one that's going to be called that, and it doesn't need to be tough just because somebody else says it needs to be. But if that's what you want as your name, then make it a little more tough, that sort of thing.
Well, there probably is a line as to when it's a little bit too inappropriate. However, you can get pretty, you have a lot of freedom. That's another nice thing about roller derby is you have a lot of freedom. A gal that we drafted last year, her derby name is KY Julie. And so you can get pretty close to that line and be very suggestive if you want to, and then you can stay way far away from it if you want to as well.
We also had Gloria. It was Gloria Stitz, and she actually she was an exotic dancer, so it was kind of interesting.
And sometimes people will choose a name before they're even drafted. You know, it's like, oh, they hope they get drafted and they hope they can have this name. And then some people like to wait until they're drafted and choose a name that works with their team theme. And like Abby Negative. Well, she plays on the Unholy Rollers, which is our vampire team. And so Abby Negative, you know, with the blood thing, it really works for their team. But actually in real life, she's, I believe, a full phlebotomist. So for her, it really interweaves not only with her team theme, but her life theme and things that she's obviously interested in herself. Some people want to be somebody completely different from who they are in their daily life, and they really look forward to the opportunity to get out on that track and be somebody else for a while.
I wanted something totally different than my normal name, which my roller derby name is On Your Knees, and I wanted something with multiple connotations that could be played with. So it kind of, when I first started, I was trying to pretend I was like a Russian person, and that didn't work at all. The knees, I used to look at it as knocking other people on their knees because I block a lot and I liked hitting a lot.
Some of the skaters are definitely like totally this thing here and completely this other thing over there. I wanted to be a part of me that doesn't have an outlet somewhere else, but I didn't really want to be somebody else. I wanted to be a part of me that couldn't really walk around in the grocery store on a daily basis and be out in the normal world without causing some kind of odd spectacle. But on the track it looks a little more like it looks inside, I think. I've never been human. I was born a fairy, and the tribes of fairies in my area began to war against each other because the space that was available for us to live was being diminished as a result of pollution and encroachment from the humanoid race. And so what my tribe did in order to handle the war is to kind of go with what humans were doing and do genetic and technological manipulations on certain individuals. And so I stepped up as a warrior and participated in that process. Unfortunately, there were side effects, and among them were that I grew too large for my wings, they fell off, And obviously at this size I really couldn't live there anymore. And so I came to the Race of Man, and I was found by Little Miss the Haven and Alligator, and they welcomed me into their team of superheroes because I have an interesting skill set and I was able to help defeat evil this way. So, you know, the purple and the orange is coming from the fairy elements, and obviously we've got some other things going on that are the cyborg elements. Well, this is my uniform, and in the derby culture we're like, it's not a costume, it's a uniform. And the jersey, obviously this is my team, Quad Squad, and on the back we've got our number clearly displayed, as well as our name.
I mean, normally I'd wear like a couple pairs of tights, a couple pairs of underwear, and then you got like your skirt, so people are not gonna see anything. The tops are usually layered too, so. And usually we wear some sort of stockings or pantyhose underneath the fishnet, so you get fishnet burn, which is really uncomfortable.
You'll find a lot of the derby girls will have consistent jewelry like alligator, whereas I think she wears 2 necklaces. She has one with an alligator, and then she has one with alligator teeth that I made for her. And this is a hodag, and as Sirene Fairyborg, I see this as like my totem. And so it's kind of a spirit guide and a source of strength for me. And the bearings, one of them is you get when you're on your draft year. So your very first season you always get a bearing, and then whenever your team wins a championship you get a bearing. And so those are my bearings. And so the hodag element is indicative of the fact that I'm originally from Rhinelander, Wisconsin, and I think the hodag is a great beast. I cannot think of another sport that has the diverse and empowering elements that roller derby has, and the ability to portray a really positive and exciting message to young girls that, wow, I can be female and I can be feminine, I can be strong and aggressive at the same time. And these are the things that I hope that people come away with when they come to experience roller derby. I can absolutely guarantee that when somebody comes to see roller derby for the very first time, the very least they're going to come away with is, oh my God, I have never seen anything like that in my life.